So I'm an imaging person, but let's talk about strategic publishing. Do I need this, or is it enough with?
Yeah, just for the Zoom. If you can.
I'll keep using the microphone. That's fine. So very briefly, I'm going to talk about appeal, posting preprints, curating your brand, marketing your research, choosing non-predatory journals, and going open access. And we'll go into some of these things. Some of the stuff might be old hat for you, some might be new. I hope there might be one or two gems in here for you. But let me tell you a story. Radiology is the leading journal in the medical imaging space, and it's sort of where everybody aspires to publish. So, of course, when we had the big results from the big study, we sent it off to the big journal, and we were so excited. And we went off, and it goes off to peer review. Then, as it happened one day, peer review had not come back yet. My colleague and I went to a seminar, much like today, for early mid-career researchers. And it was from the Swedish, I'm Swedish, so this was in Sweden, the Swedish equivalent of the NHMRC, the Federal Medical Research, Swedish Research Council. And a professor of virology, as it was telling us what's important for strategic publishing and for your career, to forward your career. And he said, dear friends, colleagues, and Swedes, you're a bunch of wimps. You get a no from the journal and you say, oh, I'm so sorry. And you go off and you try to publish in another journal. And I'm telling you right now, if you want funding from the Swedish Research Council, you need to put that wimpness aside. You have to have at least a couple publications in the top journals. So if you get that no, there will be an American that will also get a no and will be appealing to the editor, and they will be that squeaky wheel to get their publication across the line, and you will not, because you're just a complacent Swede. And then, yeah. And so we were like, oh yeah, well, that was thought worthy. And I was thinking about that, and we go back. And as we returned to our offices that afternoon, bling, the decision letter comes from radiology. And the decision letter says, after thoughtful consideration, and unfortunately, no, reject. And that's it. And we were very, understandably disappointed. And then we said, no, this is not what we're going to accept. We're going to take, what we just learned, and we're going to appeal. So we write back to the editor. We say, dude, what's wrong here? Like, how do we go about? We didn't say dude, right? But how do we go about questioning this? Because the reviews were actually good. But the ones that weren't good were just completely off the rocker. They had misunderstood completely. And the editor wrote back from personally, we have a mechanism for that here at Radiology. Please send me a point-by-point comment, not a point-by-point response to how you're going to revise the manuscript, but a point-by-point comment explaining why the reviewers are off base and missing the point, and that they've misunderstood it. And if, upon looking at your sort of review of the reviewers, I'll make a judgment if they're completely off. And if they're off, I'll send it out for 2 new reviewers to give you a second chance. And so we sharpened our pens and we wrote, this is not, and they completely misunderstood. Therefore, this cannot be a major limitation of the study. And then the point number 2, therefore, this cannot be a major, and then we delineate. And we had, we had substance, and got the letter back from the editor. Thank you for that comment. I'll now send it out for new reviewers. New reviewers review it, and then, whammo, we got published in Radiology. So this was an absolutely pivotal study. Einar Heiberg, the first author there, this was an absolute pivotal study in his career. He had not had any big journal publication before, as in top journal publication. And shortly thereafter, he applied to and got funding from the Swedish Research Council, the equivalent of the NHMRC. And it's it's a highly cited paper now. So the moral of the story is definitely do the appeal, because everybody else is the Americans are doing it. Many other people are doing it. So then I was all excited. Now I can appeal. So I get my next manuscript back from another journal, and I was like, oh no, these guys are off. I got to appeal this. So I wrote a letter to the editor, and the editor wrote back, it wasn't even close. Sorry, mate, it wasn't even close. So it doesn't work every time. But if it is justified, don't shy away from appealing. It's important because getting those high impact publications is a key to success. You've heard it before. I'll just reiterate it. But if you want to get the big grant, you also got to get into the big journal. So the NHMRC, I'm going to talk about preprints. They allow preprints. You might know this already, but if you didn't, they allow preprints on your track record. So especially when you're early in the career, maybe even the earliest in the career, maybe you have one publication, maybe two publications, but you might have two or three that are submitted. Put in those preprints, and you can dramatically increase your track record and your publication track record. And this is important not only for grants, when you're applying for scholarships, when you're applying for awards, when you're applying for PhD admission, when you're applying for jobs. In every setting, there is no reason, unless you have something very secretive that you don't want to get scooped on, which I would suggest that you question whether or not how secretive your work is, because often there's benefits of getting it out there anyway. I mean, for example, you get it out there, you get a document identifier, and you are you're first. You have a date. You establish precedence. But I'll take an example of a PhD admissions. So I had a presumptive PhD student, had a bachelor's degree, but no honors degree. And as you may or may not know, if you want to get admitted as a PhD student at the University of Sydney, you have to have a master's by research or an honors. But it's not enough to just have a bachelor's degree. If not, you have to start with a master's by research so you can transition to a PhD. It doesn't make it any longer, but there's this sort of first year of, or depending on if you're full-time or part-time, first year of not being yet a PhD student, not yet being qualified for PhD scholarships, for example. And this PhD student in question, for me, had written a manuscript that was under review somewhere and had just gotten rejected. They didn't do that work with me, but now came to me to do a PhD. And we realized that you can actually claim that the associate dean research, I believe, or the dean that is responsible for research education admissions, I forget who it was at the time, can deem somebody having equivalent of a master's by research, even though they haven't enrolled in a master's by research, and that would be by having a full original research publication. And this the PhD student in question, or the presumptive PhD student in question, had done that, but had not yet gotten it published. So what we did was, when it was now not under review, he put it up as a preprint and submitted that preprint with his admission and got admitted as a PhD student directly, instead of having to do a master's by research for a year before transitioning. So that was one useful use of a preprint. There are many. All of my students that apply for scholarships and jobs on your track record and your publications include the preprints. So you may use this, maybe not. I tend to use the medRxiv here on the left. And this is a couple of things I want to highlight here. First of all, at the top is the URL. And you see how it ends there? If you could, I don't know if you can see in the size of the text, it ends in the V2. V2 means that it's version 2. If you remove the V2 from the URL and go for it, you get to this page anyway. It always gets to the latest version. But the point is that a preprint cannot be updated an infinite amount of times. You don't have to, it's not a one and done thing. If you want to update it after you've got a rejection, but you want to make changes before you submit to the next journal, you should do that. You, of course, get a document identifier, the DOI there. And then also, once it gets published in medRxiv, it automatically says now published in this case, the journal that it got published in, with a link to it. So this is something that we use for now as a rule for all of our manuscripts, except the ones that are sent as late-breaking trials as abstracts to conferences. They don't allow a preprint because they want to be like a late-breaking trial. But there's another really good thing for preprints that has a niche use, but you might not know about it. So in the cardiology field, there's the Journal of American College of Cardiology family of journals called JACC. And this is the big stuff in the cardiology space. And JACC has a tendency, and its subjournals, to say, thank you for your manuscript. We liked it, but not enough to publish it in its form. Could you please cut it down to an 800-word letter, and we'll publish it. And there's that, okay, should I have an 800-word letter or a full manuscript? So that happened to us once, and we were before we started using preprints, and we were going, darn it, we really want to publish this, and we want to get it into the big journal. It's important strategically for a career, but it's such a bummer to not have all the data, all the methods, and all this stuff. So the next time around, we put in a preprint before we submit it to the journal. And then they said, oh, we like your research, but we want to cut it down to an 800-word letter. I said, I know this trick. And so we put in the following sentence: comprehensive methods are available as a preprint. And then we referenced reference number 5. And there's the reference to that preprint, in fact, the one here on the left. And they say, oh, no, we can't have a preprint in the references because the reviewers haven't had a chance to review that, because they're not reviewing preprints. They're just reviewing what you've submitted. Because initially we said comprehensive methods and results are available in preprint. I said, oh, come on, mate. How do we do this? How can we, it's in the interest of the readership. They want to know the methods at least. They say, okay, if you just use the word available as the methods are available, not if you don't refer to results, then it's okay. Still, of course, all the results are in there. So if you're submitting to a journal that has a tendency to shaft to research letter, go for the preprint first, refer to the preprint in the manuscript, and you can get have your way both ways. A sneaky but useful use of preprints. The other thing is that medRxiv, for example, and most preprint servers, they only have original research, but you may or may not be familiar with the Open Science Framework. Open Science Framework is an initiative coming out of psychology initially, but it has brought into all of biomedical research, and it's available on osf.io. And they will let you do a preprint of your study protocol. They will let you do a preprint of your study design manuscript. They will let you do a preprint of your narrative review article, all of which would not normally be allowed as a preprint on conventional preprint servers like medRxiv. OSF has a lot of other things that are good. You can search, of course, their archives for what other people are doing. If you're in a competitive space and you want to make sure that somebody else isn't doing your exact same study or some variant thereof, you can search there. And then you can choose also. You can put things in preprint with an embargo date. So you can do, and you can go to the website. There's a great YouTube video that's about 10, 15 minutes long that tells all the advantages of OSF on the first page. But if you want to do preprint and it's not just original data, it's like a review article or a study design paper, highly recommend OSF. And it has a lot of other things with collaboration and data sharing, and that whole circle that we're seeing there. I won't go into every detail there, but take a look at OSF if you're interested in that. So curate your brand. I'm aware of the brand that I have as a researcher. When I go to a conference, when I give a talk, I give an impression. The people in the audience might be the reviewer of my next paper or my next grant application. So I curate my brand. I have on the left, my research group has their webpage. In the top middle, I have my academic profile online at the University of Sydney. Top right, I have my Google Scholar. Bottom middle, I have my LinkedIn profile. It's not about being a social media, I don't want to use any bad words, but someone who's just giving to everybody else for the purpose of some kind of glory. But it's quite helpful when you meet somebody new to know what their background is, and to also to let somebody else know what your background is and so to be available at a minimum with your academic profile online, a Google Scholar page, and a LinkedIn page that shows what education and work history you have. Nothing fancy, nothing lengthy, is something that I think is good form and good academic hygiene. Obviously, everybody does what they want to do themselves. I'm not forcing anybody to do anything, but I recommend it. I, for one, when I go into a meeting, or maybe even after I've been in a meeting with someone I've never met before, I take a peek at what their background is. I see if they have a LinkedIn, a Google Scholar. I'll PubMed them, and I'll look at to learn about them. And you should assume that people will be doing that about you, and you can be the jockey steering the narrative. You can be, and so if you have these presence of these profiles, you decide that narrative and inform that. So I encourage you to do that. Here also, you can see on our left, I don't know if you can see on the small details, but we have a link to our publications and a link to our preprints, so people can go and look at that if they want to. And market your research. So the strategic publishing, as much as we as scientists would want it to be an objective decision, there is so much subjectivity in here. On the one hand, the curation of the brand, but also the spread of the news. And I don't have half of these apps on my phone, but I've stopped using Twitter/X and started using Blue Sky. You might have seen that happening in the last couple of weeks. Has been a tremendous jump in academic medicine use of Blue Sky as a replacement for Twitter. And sometimes I'll post on LinkedIn as well. I use YouTube in so much as I have recordings of my lectures that I give, that if it's been recorded by as a talk at the event, I'll get that recording and I'll put it on my YouTube channel, the top right there. And then podcasts, I sound older, I don't know what, but I've always not listened to podcasts. And I just got these new headphones that make it easy to listen to podcasts and run. And all of a sudden I'm realizing, oh my gosh, there's so many people listening to maybe you're already a podcast consumer, but if you have the opportunity to be on a podcast and talk about your research, whether it be through the journal or through somebody just doing a podcast about things, go ahead and do it, because it's the sum of all the parts of all your informing. That's if somebody catches information about your paper and then cites it, it helps your citations and helps your awareness among people that will be grant reviewers and reviewers. It's all about sort of a continuous slow burn process of keeping these things going. So whatever your preference, I would encourage you to do it. Don't have to do it. It's all voluntary. But there's been studies of people that they tweet a lot about. The more an article is tweeted about, the more it then gets cited, for example. Whether there's causation in that, there's don't know. There's certainly correlation. So you can at least help the correlation along with spreading the word about it in your channel of preference. Then we get to predatory publishing. A postdoc in my group came to me and said, I'm thinking of writing this review article. I've gotten an invitation from a journal to write a review article. And I said, oh, what journal was that? And of course, it was a journal coming from MDPI. And you may or may not be aware of MDPI and Frontiers, which both are clearly labeled, or not clearly, they both are at least gray zone, if not clearly labeled, predatory journals due to their historic and also current predatory behavior. These are the two biggest ones that I get exposed to, but there are thousands of them. Go to predatoryjournals.org and look them up. Look up the journal name, look up the publisher list, and just make sure. So to give a little bit of, I had a conversation with a co-author about that we were going to send into a journal, and they wanted to send to a Frontiers journal. And I said, sorry, mate, I don't want to support Frontiers. Oh, but Frontiers is so, Frontiers in cardiovascular medicine, it's very serious. And there are many people from our esteemed institution that have published there. And it was a very esteemed institution, no question about it. I said, yes. So just because something is published in Frontiers or MDPI or whatever the predatory journal might be, just because it's published there doesn't mean it's bad science. And so you can have good science published in journals that have suboptimal or not good practices. But when I now can choose what I want to endorse by choosing a journal prospectively, there are so many journals that are not predatory that I can choose to go for. So I choose to not want it to support predatory publishing practices. Now you will perhaps go home and Google some of these things. Go to the Wikipedia page for MDPI and the Wikipedia page for Frontiers and read about the controversies that are there. And I've written back a little bit semi-snarkily to an MDPI journal. I'm sorry, I'm not allowed, I'm not going to review the article for your journal because you have predatory practices. Oh, we don't have predatory practices. I got back a flaming email from the editorial office. Sorry, mate, I choose to do it. Choose to support those which are not even close to the gray zone, which you obviously are in. This is a subject of quite a lot of debate, especially these two publishers. You'll have to make your own opinion. Mine is choose not to because there are other options. So when it comes to other options, we're all vying for that top journal, that radiology publication. But the reality of things is that it trickles down to finally acta insignificanta, and you really don't have much left to go for. You just need to get it published somewhere. Well, then in the setting of open access and open access fees, I would suggest definitely go for open access, but don't pay the fee. We can do it for free. So if there's one thing if you haven't already seen it, the read and publish agreements that the University of Sydney has is with a number of publishers representing thousands upon journals, where the article processing charge, the APC, the article processing charge, the otherwise $5,000 or 10,000 euros that you would have to pay to get it published, is covered by the university. There's a cap in total number of covered publications per year with each of these publishers, but further down on this page, you can see if we've reached the cap or not, and none of them we've reached the cap. So if you have that manuscript that you really want to get out there, it might not be a top priority as the sexiest science ever, but it's certainly scientifically valid. It will get accepted by an open access journal, and you can choose one that doesn't have a cost to your otherwise limited budget. So, in summary, don't hesitate to appeal when it's justified, but know that sometimes it wasn't even close, mate. Post your preprints if you can. There are lots of reasons to do it. We talked about, but being able to, for example, bypass the research letter thing by citing in the research letter the preprint, but also importantly, getting those track record points on your grant application to NHMRC or others. Market your research. Curate your brand by having your profiles up to date. Nothing fancy. Don't have to spend hours on it, but just have your presence there so you can decide what impression you're giving to other people that most certainly are Googling you, and market your research via the channels you feel comfortable with. I encourage that because it increases awareness, increases citations, improves your chances of that next grant and that next peer review. Choose the non-predatory journals. If that's important to you, it is for me, and go open access once you don't have much choice left, but do it for free by choosing one of the many journals that we do have article processing charge read and publish agreements with. And with that, I think I'll round off there.
Thanks, Martin. Do we have any questions? No question. I'll bring you the mic.
Thank you for the insightful talk. I just was wondering about the read and publish agreements. When the university does reach its cap, is that a sign that you should hold off submitting, or is it more about the time at which your article gets accepted, that kind of thing?
It is the date of, you'd have to check. I don't know. I think it's date of submission to the journal and not date of acceptance. Yeah. But they haven't reached their caps yet. And I'm certain that there'll be a discussion once caps are reached about how to handle that, but University of Sydney has not yet done that. It's a fairly new thing for University of Sydney. I happen to have a dual affiliation with my previous institution, which had a generous amount of things. So I would always dual affiliate myself so I could get the APC paid for in those settings. But yeah.
Hi, just a comment as well about the OSF. We've found that quite useful in registering scoping reviews. So I've done a few lately. You can't register a scoping review on something like Prospero. They don't do scoping, they just do systematic. So it is actually worth going into OSF, just doing a plug for them. And you can register it, and then you've got that actually link. You get given a link when you register it, and you can use that in your work as well. Yeah,
absolutely. The registering is very helpful. It was probably 2 months ago when I got reached out to from a former honor student of mine from a number of years ago that now I reached out, hey, by the way, FYI, I enrolled as a PhD student. Great, where can I read about it? And he goes, OSF, mate. And I was like, oh what? And so I only learned about it 2 months ago. So I'm learning as well. And it was an eye opener. We haven't quite implemented it full on in our group yet, but it's happening now for us. Hands up, how many people use OSF? Okay, how many have never heard of OSF before today? Interesting. For those of you online, that was the majority. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. We need to move to the next speaker. Thanks.